Psychological and sociocultural viewpoints. The behavioral perspective focuses on learning, and there are a number of different ways learning takes place, according to this viewpoint. The first, classical conditioning, is when a specific stimulus comes to elicit a specific response. Ivan Pavlov was the first to propose this theory, and you might recall the story about his experiments with dogs. In this experiment, at the beginning, before any conditioning, he presented the dog with some meat powder, and as a result, the dog began to salivate. These are the unconditioned stimulus and unconditioned response. The conditioned stimulus was the bell, which he rang every time the meat powder was presented. Once the dog had received the conditioned stimulus along with the unconditioned stimulus enough times, that elicited the conditioned response, which is, you'll note, also salivation, just like the unconditioned response, but in this case, it comes about as a result of the conditioned stimulus. Thus, following conditioning, when the bell was rung, the dog would salivate. If a conditioned stimulus is repeatedly presented without the unconditioned stimulus, extinction will occur. When a response is conditioned to one stimulus, it can be evoked by other similar stimuli. This is known as generalization. If you're familiar with the story of little Albert and his fear of white rabbits, at one point he also began to be afraid of other white fluffy things, such as white kittens. However, when a person learns to distinguish between similar stimuli, we call that discrimination. The next type of learning is operant or instrumental conditioning. In order to review what you know about this kind of learning, please watch the clip from The Big Bang Theory. As you watch, look for accuracies and inaccuracies.
Are you finished?
Well, thank you. How thoughtful. Would you like a chocolate?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Sheldon. I almost sat in your spot.
Did you? I didn't notice. Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
You're here a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh, hey, Kim. Yeah, you know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall. You'll never guess who they got to replace you at work.
Okay. I know what you're doing.
Really?
Yes. You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
No, I don't want it. Sheldon, you can't train my girlfriend like a lab rat.
Actually, it turns out I can.
Well, you shouldn't.
There's just no pleasing you, is there, Leonard? You weren't happy with my previous approach to dealing with her, so I decided to employ operant conditioning techniques, building on the works of Thorndike and B.F. Skinner. Yet by this time next week, I believe I can have her jumping out of a pool, balancing a beach ball on her nose.
No, this has to stop now.
Are you saying that I am forbidden from applying a harmless, scientifically valid protocol that will make our lives better?
Yes, you're forbidden.
Bad, Leonard. You know, using positive reinforcement techniques, I could train that behavior out of her in a week.
No.
If you let me use negative reinforcement, I can get it done before we go to bed.
You're not squirting her in the face with water.
No, of course not. We're talking very mild electric shocks. No tissue damage whatsoever.
In instrumental or operant conditioning, the individual first operates on the environment, and then the behavior is followed by a consequence, which will either increase or decrease the behavior in the future. In the video clip, Sheldon refers to giving Penny chocolate for the behavior he desires as positive reinforcement. This is correct. Positive reinforcement increases behavior by offering something good. Sheldon also refers to following a behavior with a mild electric shock as negative reinforcement. This is incorrect. This is in fact punishment when we try to decrease a behavior by giving an aversive consequence. Negative reinforcement is when we increase a behavior by taking away something bad. So imagine you were extremely nauseous and you took a particular pill and you felt completely better. How likely would you be to take that pill the next time you were nauseous? Probably very likely. Observational learning refers to learning through observation alone without any pairing or reinforcement taking place. Most people do not adhere strictly to a behavioral perspective, but instead use a cognitive behavioral perspective. This perspective focuses on how thoughts or cognitions and information processing can become distorted and lead to maladaptive emotions and behaviors. An important aspect of the cognitive behavioral perspectives is how we think about the reasons why things happen. Psychologists call this attributions. If you think about, for example, receiving a paper or a test back with a much lower grade than you had hoped to get, the very first thing almost all human beings do is try to figure out why. That is the process of making an attribution. Folks can have a characteristic way in which they tend to assign causes to bad or good events. Psychologists refer to this as their attributional style. Pessimism and optimism, for example, are attributional styles. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, the clinicians attempt to alter their patients' maladaptive cognitions to be more adaptive and more rational. The impact of the behavioral and cognitive perspectives has also been great. Some of the strengths include the fact that cognitive behavioral therapies are effective in treating a number of disorders, and we'll see this again and again throughout this course. Also, behavior and cognitive perspectives are based on science, and researchers have conducted many, many studies to test the ideas and the outcome of treatment. Critics would point out that simply changing someone's behavior or thought patterns might be superficial, and not addressing any underlying or root causes may result in what we call symptom substitution. In other words, those underlying problems will pop up again in a different set of maladaptive behaviors or cognitions. When psychologists talk about psychosocial causal factors, they refer to really an infinite number of possible factors, but some of the really important ones that psychologists have focused on are things like early deprivation or trauma, inadequate parenting styles, marital discord and divorce, and maladaptive peer relationships. The sociocultural viewpoint is concerned with the social environment as a source of vulnerability to mental disorder, as well as resistance to mental disorder. Some of the factors associated with greater risk for a variety of disorders include low socioeconomic status, unemployment, being subjected to prejudice and discrimination, and social change and uncertainty.